Hi, I'm Lizzie, and I had an experience that changed the way I viewed myself. Okay, so I'm an overweight girl. I have been like that since a very young age. I got all the usual teasing that fat kids get. People called me names, bullied me, imitated the way I walked. All of that hurt, but I liked being fat. I liked the way my curves felt, the way my body moved. The other overweight girls in my class would talk about their diets and how they were trying to lose weight. I felt like there was something wrong with me for wanting to stay big. The only downside was that nobody at my school would date me. I was envious of the thinner girls and their football player boyfriends. I really wanted a prom date, but I knew that would never happen. But outside my school, I had better luck. There was a surprising number of men online who were obsessed with big, beautiful women. I would post my pictures on dating sites and forums for men who loved fat women. I was only 18, and I enjoyed the attention. How they worshipped my body. One guy, Kyle, said he'd love to go on a date with me. He called me a goddess, saying I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. I agreed to go to a burger joint with him. He looked even better than in his pictures. He was slim and in good shape. I loved that he didn't mind being with a big woman. I ordered a burger and a side salad, and he told the server, "Make that 2, please, and fries, no salad." I thought he meant he would eat the other one, but when the dishes arrived, he pushed both toward me. "Eat up," he said. "Aren't you going to eat?" I asked, surprised. He shrugged. "I had a big breakfast. You can have mine." I finished the first burger, feeling a little awkward that he was just sitting there sipping a Coke and watching me eat. "I'm actually full," I said. "Maybe we can get a to-go box for the other burger?" "Aw, come on," he said. "I like to see a woman enjoying her food." Hesitantly, I picked up the second burger and bit in. His eyes were practically shining. "God, you're beautiful," he whispered. That made me feel good, so I grinned and took another bite. "Maybe you can have dessert too?" he said almost to himself. I did think there was something a little weird about his obsession, but as he told me later, he'd always been attracted to obese women. He said he loved the softness of their bodies, loved the look of their skin rolls. He didn't know why so many men wanted skinny women. "I'd really like to get you even bigger," he said. "It's hard to imagine you even more gorgeous, but I think you could be." I was so excited by his interest, I started fantasizing that we'd become girlfriend and boyfriend. Even though he was older, I wondered if he would come to prom with me. On every date, he would make me eat a lot. A couple of times, I got sick afterward, but he told me it was okay. I'd get used to it. "Why do you want me to eat until I'm sick?" I tried to laugh, but I wasn't really joking. "I just want there to be more of you to love," he said. That made me feel good. I gained weight fast. I'd already been nearly obese, but now I definitely was. "There are a lot of health risks associated with obesity," my doctor warned me. "We can do some tests, check your thyroid levels, see if there's a reason for the sudden weight gain. I'll also put you in touch with a nutritionist." I told myself that doctors were prejudiced against fat people. I'd read lots of stories online about doctors who wouldn't even help their patients' pain until they lost weight. At Kyle's request, I kept eating. I did start to have some problems. My back hurt. I became out of breath very easily. My clothes didn't fit. The kids at school got meaner. "Lizzie," my mom huffed as she took me shopping for new clothes, "we can't keep buying you new clothes. You need to call that nutritionist." I ignored her. Kyle supported me, even if my own mother didn't. "We are boyfriend and girlfriend, right?" I asked Kyle after we'd been seeing each other for a couple of months. I mean, we saw each other nearly every day. He was always telling me how into me he was. He knew I didn't want to have sex yet, and he said that was fine. I was worth the wait. He laughed. "Why do we have to use labels?" he asked, taking my hand. "Can't we just let it be what it is?" "But What was it? He never seemed interested in kissing. He never wanted to go anywhere nice, just fast food places where I could eat as much food as possible for cheap. He didn't ask how school was going or what colleges I was applying to. I told him I'd try to go somewhere close by so we could still see each other. He barely replied. One day, I decided to ask Kyle to prom. It was only a few weeks away, and I desperately wanted to show off to my classmates that I had a handsome man who thought I was a goddess. I put aside my burger and popped the question. He gave an awkward grin. That would be weird, wouldn't it? He nodded to the burger. Finish that. I think it would be really fun, I insisted. It might seem silly to you, but I want to go. I don't want to go to your prom with you, you stupid pig, he shouted, slamming his hand down on the table. I gazed at him, shocked. People were staring at us. The same people Kyle always told me to ignore when they stared at me for being fat. I was humiliated beyond words. I got up and fled home in tears. That night, I stared at my body in the mirror. I realized I no longer felt sexy. Somewhere, I'd crossed a line to where I didn't feel good, physically or emotionally. I missed the fat body I'd once felt comfortable and attractive in. Kyle eventually texted, telling me he was so sorry. He'd had a stressful day at work and hadn't meant to say such an awful thing. It made my heart swell with hope. Maybe he did still like me. But I was torn. Could I ever really forgive him? That night, I started getting chest pains. At school the next day, they were worse. The last thing I remember was trying to stand up in chemistry class and get to a bathroom to throw up. Next thing I knew, I was in a hospital bed. My mom was standing over me and looked like she'd been crying. I was so scared. I didn't know what was going on. The doctor explained that my sudden weight gain had led to a blood pressure spike. She said if I didn't start eating healthier, my health problems would continue. I cried for a while after that. Mom asked me what had happened, and finally, I told her about Kyle. She was shocked and scared. Said she wanted to find Kyle and kill him. We talked for a long time, and by the time I was released, I was resolved. Never again would I alter my body for a man. I've been working out with my nutritionist for a while now, and I'm almost back to a weight where I feel good. I've also done some research on fat fetishism. Turns out there are quite a few Kyles out there. Men who claim to love big women, but they don't necessarily love the woman herself. They like the thrill of making her eat a lot of food and watching her get bigger. I understand now that Kyle never really cared about me. His interest in me was based only on the way I looked, nothing further. It made me feel objectified, and it's taking my self-esteem longer to recover than my body. But I hope one day I'll stop blaming myself for what happened and learn to love myself. Thanks for watching this video and listening to my story.
Hello, I'm Clara, and something absolutely terrifying happened to me. I'm one of those unlucky ones who wakes up at the drop of a pin. I always thought being a light sleeper was the worst thing in the world, until one night when I was 13 years old. My parents had to go to an emergency conference in London, so they left me home alone for a week. They didn't seem to mind because my grandma lives a few blocks away, so they knew I'd be fine. The night before they were due back, I went out with my friends for milkshakes at our local diner. My friend's mom dropped me home and I headed straight to bed. I was so tired, I fell straight into a deep sleep. I woke up feeling thirsty and reached out for my water. That's when I heard it. It sounded like someone was in my parents' room. I suddenly panicked and wondered if I'd slept through to the next night and my parents had already come back. Was I that tired? I checked my phone and saw it was still the same night and it was 3 a.m. My heart started thumping in my chest. I tried to be rational. Maybe Felix, the neighbor's cat, had slipped through an open window. Putting on my bravest face possible, I crept towards my door and locked it, just in case. I then slid down onto my knees, pulling the key out so that I could peek through the lock. That's when I saw him. There was a man standing in our hall, rummaging through one of my mom's handbags. I froze. My heart felt like it was about to pop out and my palms were sweating. I blinked, and when I looked again, he was coming right for me. Could he see my eye? I backed away from the door and covered my mouth to stop myself from screaming as he tried my door handle. I didn't even want to imagine what would have happened next if I hadn't locked my door. I got a good look at him, and I knew in that moment that his was a face I'd never forget. He kicked my door in frustration, and then I heard him walking away. I crawled back to the lock and saw him heading for my parents' room. This was my chance. It was now or never. I put the key back in the lock and, as quietly as possible, unlocked it. I opened the door, praying that it wouldn't squeak, and crawled towards the stairs. I don't even know why I was crawling. As I was making my way down the stairs, I forgot what happened on the third stair from the bottom. As my foot touched it, it groaned beneath me, and I felt sure that was it. He was going to come out and find me there and shoot me or something. The next thing I knew, I was running for the phone. I felt like my whole body was going to explode. I could hear him throwing things around above me, and as I picked up the phone, my mind went blank. I couldn't even remember what to call. After a few seconds, I remembered. I whispered into the phone, and the woman on the other end could barely hear me. I crawled behind the sofa and lay there crying silently for what felt like a year. Suddenly, I heard his footsteps on the stairs, and I could see him coming for me. He got closer and closer, and just as he reached the end of the sofa where my feet were, the front door burst open and 3 cops ran in. My heart had been beating so hard I hadn't even heard them arriving outside. I stood up shivering and hysterical, and the female cop came over and hugged me. I just stood there crying in her arms while the other cops handcuffed the guy and marched him out to the car. He looked back at me, and I'll never forget the way his eyes pierced through me. It was in our local paper the following day, and he was given a fine for breaking and entering, but he wasn't locked up or anything. I guess it's lucky that my parents keep all our valuables locked away in a safe. But anyway, that part almost scared me most. The fact that he was still out there somewhere. What if he came back? His face still haunts me to this day. And yesterday I went to collect some bread for my mom at the grocery store. It's a pretty small store, so I headed to the back where they keep the bread. I was playing on my phone and I didn't notice the basket on the ground, and I tripped over. As I landed, I noticed a familiar-looking guy putting stuff into his backpack. Then I clicked. He was stealing! I let out a gasp, and he turned on his heels. As soon as our eyes locked, I realized why he looked so familiar. It was him, the burglar from 2 years ago. He winked at me and continued taking things off the shelf and shoving them in his bag. I froze again, but this time not in fear. I grabbed a can of spaghetti hoops and threw it right at him. It hit him and he got such a fright he fell into a stack of toilet rolls, sending them flying everywhere. I screamed and the store clerk and security guard came running. They found his bag full of stolen goods and called the cops. I just stood there smiling proudly. There was no way on earth that burglar was getting away a second time. I wanted to make sure he'd be locked up once and for all. Please feel